Welcome back, everyone. Today I am here with Janet Needham. She is half of my favorite pharmacist couple, Team Needham, and she is a compounding pharmacist who specializes in hormones. And she is here today to talk about women's health and hormone replacement. And I just am so excited to dive into this because there is not enough known about it, and Janet is the person to explain it all. Welcome, Janet.
Thanks for having me, Courtney. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you back on the show. It's been a while.
It has, yes.
All right, let's talk about your pharmacy. Let's start what you do or where you started. You and your husband, Shawn, are pharmacists, and you guys own a pharmacy out in Washington State. And what do you do in this pharmacy that is different than other pharmacies to start with?
Sure. So we actually haven't been in our pharmacy space of our own pharmacy for 25 years this year in October. So super proud and excited about that. Part of the reason we broke off into this part of our life is we were so disenchanted when we started practicing pharmacy. We went into this profession to heal people and to help people. But what we were observing is that people were becoming sicker and sicker. And, you know, one or two meds turned into five. And then we started adding more. And, one day you wake up and you're like, everybody's going out the door with a sack of medications and they look worse than when they started. So something's gone awry, right? Like when I first started pharmacy, it was rare that people had maybe one or two meds, right? Like one or two things that they were adjusting. And as we were speaking earlier, what we started noticing too is that one of the most common refills for a prescription in the early days was the birth control pill. And you being, a little bit younger than me, probably was stepping into that too. Most of my friends, we started the pill early in life. We were in our 20s. Um, Regulate your cycle, take care of your acne, all those kind of things. But it's led to much more. And unfortunately, if you look out there today, how many medications people are taking, it's sad because there's a balance, right? Like there's a risk and a gain. But if it's all going down the wrong path and people aren't thriving, they're just existing and their health is declining, which we can both agree that in the United States, our longevity and length of life is really declining quickly. Some of that's lifestyle, I believe, our food, our sleep, our chemical exposures, our stress, but it's also the pharmaceuticals, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Let's just talk women and hormones, a hormone itself is really a messenger and we would die without them. We need them to exist. But you and I were probably just taught that there's just the sex hormones and then you have your adrenal hormones, right?
Yep.
And what we've done with women since, oh man, early in the path of medicine is that we've just given them so care as far as I'm concerned. Probably the first hormone on the market was Permarin, and then it went into birth control. And, we thought the pill was going to be some magic fix for a lot of things, but in reality, the pill is put women into a chemical menopause because our body does not recognize those estrogens and even, well, Premarin for menopause, it is a natural product. We can agree on that, but it's not natural to humans. It's natural to a horse. So here we are, we're giving women throughout time, horse urine to help their menopause and young women to solve any of the issues, whether it be cycling, migraines, headaches, acne, just to protect you. And not a lot of women end up on birth control pill with not even using it for contraceptive reasons. It might be your PCOS, your endometriosis,
Yep.
all those reasons, right?
Yep.
But unfortunately, these products that we bring in through the pharmaceutical side of our healthcare is that they shut our ovaries down. They actually put us in menopause. So women that are my age, I'm 58, think of how long we've been suffering for trying to keep up our bones. And I'll use myself for an example. I grew up on a ranch, did a lot of lifting throughout my whole entire life, very athletic. Met my husband out of college. He lifted, I mean, we lifted heavy. We work out, we exercise. And I was shocked to find that my bones were in very bad shape. Like I'm thinking, why? Why would this be, right? Like, how could this be? I should have really strong bones. By the time I'm 30, I should have had a massive, really strong bones, right? But I was actually osteopenic. And if I start looking back, from what we are doing in our pharmacy and realizing, I did it to myself because I used safe and effective products that were approved by the FDA that actually wreaked havoc in my body because the signals to make new bones are shut down. The signals that we need in our brain and our gut are shut down. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yes. Yes.
So, when we think that we're doing a healthy thing, because we keep going in every year, I always did my PAPs and my checks and my health. Actually, I was doing detriment to my body. And the other problem with the birth control pill, and I don't know if you've seen this, is it is linked to also thyroid issues. So many women that are hitting postmenopause and menopause are having thyroid problems because of taking synthetic hormones. And I will tell you right now, there's a lot of influencers out there that Shawn and I actually, we went and listened to them speak and listened to their conferences. They link birth control pills, whether they're estrogen based or whether they're progestin, in the same group as being hormones for women, which isn't true. I mean, they're
Mm-mm.
apples and oranges. For example, progestin, like the Mirena IUD, is actually harmful to your body because it's not a real progesterone.
No.
But if you pulled out, and read OBGYNs, doctors, they all lump it together in the same thing, but they're very different. Progestin in, your Mirena IUD is to prevent contraceptive, it's a contraceptive to prevent pregnancy. If we become pregnant, we need the hormone progesterone to maintain that pregnancy. But again, it's not just for conceiving, it's not just for reproduction. We need progesterone to tell our body, hey, I need you to make some new bone cells today. Let's rebuild those bones. So, in my case, and probably thousands and thousands of women out there, our body wasn't giving that message. So, we weren't rebuilding those bones because that signal was stopped because we were in chemical menopause. So, in a lot of ways, what we thought we were doing to be healthy was actually counterproductive and unhealthy for us. So being in the realm that I'm in, I'm able to help women. We consult on labs, and then of course, we compound the products that are natural to the body, such as progesterone, estradiol, DHEA, testosterone for women, melatonin. All those things that we need to be healthy and vibrant and thriving, not just existing.
Absolutely. And there's so much to unpack with what you just said because, looking at, again, taking it back to pharmacy school and what we learned as what was a quote unquote hormone, we looked at sex hormones. We weren't taught as like the thyroid really being a hormone and that insulin is a hormone and that, even, down to vitamin D, right? The precursor of all of the hormones. And
Correct.
then breaking that down, taking that into to even our neurotransmitters, which can even be, you can call those enzymes or hormones as well. Progesterones get broken down into GABA. GABA is our calming neurotransmitter. So then it's
Exactly.
like how many women that, taking it back to the five scripts, oh, you're put on birth control. And the next thing you know, then they're going on an antidepressant or a benzo because now they have anxiety. And then the next thing they can't sleep and then they're gaining weight. And it's just this cycle of prescriptions when a lot of it comes down to, almost the lack of informed decision making that our Western medicine system has failed us in. And, it's a lot of times, you know, girls don't know. I was 15, I believe, when I was put on the pill. From the day I got a cycle, they were heavy, they were terrible, they were so painful. And, the first answer was, put me on the pill to regulate. Oh, that's still not helping. Well, here I had endometriosis. I know years and years of being on the pill and trying all of the different patches and all the things that they would come out with, and nothing ever solved my problem until I was 40 and we started to dive into, okay, oh, let's talk about a hysterectomy and removing organs. And that was when I took a step back and started to say, what are we missing from this piece of the puzzle? And, looking at nutrition and the different things that regulate our hormones and actually make them function in the best way possible. So there's so many things here. And then the bone issues that come from it. And then we can even dive down the rabbit hole of not just birth control pills, all of these other medications that can slow gastric motility or mess with our gut acid. And then we're not absorbing our micronutrients properly. And then that leads to these bone density issues, and then it becomes too late when people are in their 60s and 70s and have these issues and they think that they can just calcium supplement their way back to bone health. And like it doesn't work that way, right?
No. So I think the missing part of it in my brain is how our body's made. You can't supplement yourself out of low hormones. You
No,
can't you can increase your body's ability to respond better, I believe, especially when we're younger in life. But when we've gotten through menopause, that's not going to change, right? But for younger women, yes, the vitamin D, the proper nutrition. You and I were taught in school high carb, low fat, low protein, right? Which was, I'm not knocking carbohydrates. I'm just saying that the direction that we were pushed was in the processed food, right? I
yep.
mean, the grocery stores changed so much from the time, we were small to what it is now. And, do people even know what real food tastes like, how to make it, how to eat
Yes.
it? It's kind of sad. So the nutrients that we need to build our body are missing. And then when we have all these other things like our plastics and our chemicals that we are daily ingesting, whether it's our water, whether it's, the containers that we have our food in or cook it in, or, all those things, it adds up, So when we get to the space of, and then we add a pharmaceutical to solve the problem and not look back at, okay, what is it really that's missing? And like in your case, as a younger girl, if I was working with the right provider, we'd be regulating your cycle with the right amount of natural hormones, such as progesterone, because obviously, if it's a heavy flow, it's too much estrogen. So, here again, when you're looking at root causes, it's like, what's missing? What's not happening correctly? Obviously, diet, sleep, exercise, all that's going to help. But if you're cycling wrong and too heavy, you need progesterone to balance that out. So, it really comes down to what balance is in your body that's appropriate to be thriving and helpful, not just, living through something awful. And again, the point that you made about, changing your gut, well, synthetic hormones do that to you. It changes your stomach. So it's going to change your neurotransmitters. How many women do you know that say, I feel awful, I feel bad? And then they get, like you said, another pharmaceutical. So let's give them an antidepressant, and that makes the whole picture worse because now I don't like my partner, or now I don't like my life, So then we get a sleeping pill or an antipsychotic. I mean, it just keeps building and building. So yeah, we're not looking at why. And the tragedy is that most people don't step back like you did with the hysterectomy and the surgery. They just go forward because they trust who's in front of them and says, oh, in my mind, this person knows what they're doing, so I'm going to trust them with their credentials, which I've heard over and over again. I'm double board certified and I have all this.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. I'm not knocking your education. I'm not knocking what you've achieved, but are you really solving the problem? Like taking out body parts should be at last resort. Yes, there's times where it's appropriate, but many times there's not. I have women that will walk in or call me and say, "What do you think?" My doctor says, "Just in case." I'm like, "Are you having any physical problems?" No, he's just thinking, it'd be so much easier. I won't have to worry about a cycle. And I'm like, well, on average, a woman that has a hysterectomy, and the earlier you have it, the worse it is, I think, on your longevity. But for most women, it takes about 10 years off their life.
Wow.
Think of
Wow.
how impactful that is.
Wow.
Because I don't care if you leave the ovaries, if you remove a body part the size of somebody's fist that has that much vascularity to it. I mean, think about it. It's the vascularity is huge because, if we do choose to have a family, we need all that to support life. We remove that and that vascularity is gone, your ovaries start shrinking. So it isn't long before you're just not putting out anything.
Right.
So, and then, we just talked about bones, but what about your mind? We need hormones for our brain.
Right.
We need that for preventing dementia and Alzheimer's. We need it for a healthy thinking process. We need estrogen for our vascular walls. So, cardiac disease, the number one killer, cardiovascular disease, we shut off our natural hormones. We give synthetic or the what. So why should we be surprised that our nation's dying of cardiac disease? I mean, we're doing it from all sides, right? Our food, our activities, our sleep, and then let's just give pharmaceutical problems out there with, lowering our natural hormones. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised. It's kind of sad in a way because it's like, when the madness keeps happening, shouldn't we ask ourselves why? I mean, for decades now, at least 4 decades, we've been doing the same thing over and over again, and we're coming out with the same results, if not worse.
It's true. And I watch it all the time. I watched it when I worked in the pharmacy, and I watch it now even with clients that come to me in the functional space. And it's almost at this point turning a blind eye. At this point, it's like there's so much information out there. And again, over and over again, this is happening over and over again. And, we can't stress enough to those listening that, like, open your eyes and be informed, because that's what this is all about. It's sad to say, but it's what you just said about practitioners. When I went to my last OBGYN appointment, and and we were just talking about, I gave up on even asking. I know how to treat and do my own thing now from the functional perspective when it comes to my cycle and my hormones. I go in just to make sure that there's nothing going on. I have a family history, and I just go in and I at least just get my peps and my annual checkup. And it was sad when I was talking to her and she was asking me, how's business? And I was just talking from the functional aspect, and they were talking about getting a new, mammogram center and blah, blah, blah. And I said, did you guys ever think about bringing, some functional medicine services to, the practice, just, teaching women about nutrition and just grassroots things, lifestyle modifications, I know always your answer for me has always been, a hysterectomy since I turned 40, anytime I have a problem, you know. And she said, we thought about it, but we can't. She, in no words other than saying it's not a money maker, she just mentioned surgery versus functional medicine. It wouldn't work having both in the same place, was what she said. So it was, in other words, without rolling this practice under the bus and saying, well, we make a whole ton crap more money on bringing in somebody and giving them a hysterectomy versus sitting down with them and teaching them the proper foods to eat to help, regulate and balance their hormones. And it was just kind of sad because, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at all, but it just was kind of sad to me. And I know as a pharmacist, when I was in practice as a pharmacist, and even now, sometimes when I sit down with my clients and patients and say, I make a suggestion, and a lot of times it happens more in the pharmacy, not so much the functional space, because people are kind of sick of what they've been dealt with in the Western medicine space when they come to me in the functional space. But in the pharmacy, they used to say to me, well, I have to check with my doctor. And even when they would come in and pick up something like a statin medication, and I was like, okay, if you must, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm not going to try to knock a prescription out of your hand and say you're taking it for a reason and whatever. But I would say something like, if you must take this, you really need to support things that it's depleting. You should really pick up some CoQ10 because you really need that natural enzyme you produce, and that drug is depleting that. So you want to make sure you have enough of it for cardiovascular function. And again, it was a 50-50 shot where so many people were like, great, thanks for the information. And then the other 50% was like, well, I need to check with my doctor. And I'm like, your doctor is negligent that they didn't tell you that before you left. So it circles back around to that, who's in front of you, double board certified, giving people the information. Because I think that's where that gap is, that's missing out, where that, for people to be informed, I think is the biggest thing, not turning the blind eye, looking at really how do you feel and how do you actually fix it instead of staying on a hamster wheel. You know what I mean?
Very true. Well, I feel very good when I go to sleep at night. I'm just going to say that because I can look in the mirror and know that what I've shared with a client today or shared with knowledge is true.
Yes.
And that's important to me.
Yes.
Informed consent in my mind is totally missing. If you didn't inform, and I will tell you, I was probably just as guilty as this prior to this. I mean, vitamin statin is what, we're talking about, right?
Mhm. Right.
Everybody, and now we're
Should be in the
going
water,
lower,
right?
right?
Yep.
And I mean, there's other meds that are out there like that. But did your doctor tell you alternatives? Did he give you nutritional alternatives? Did he give you the side effects? Did he say, what probability is it that this is going to help you if you do have a heart attack? How many people does this save from having a heart attack? How many days longer are you going to live in your life by being on this medication,
Zero,
right?
right? It's,
Exactly.
yep.
That's the problem. And we do lean into science for the answers, but as far as I'm concerned, that stuff has been totally smeared for me because 4 decades later, we're talking about massive amounts of people dying every day. I mean, we just went through, 5 years ago, that thing that we want to all forget about, right?
Yep.
But the pandemic is cardiovascular disease for men and women.
Yes.
And that has to come down to root causes. It can't be just one thing, it's multiple things, right? If that physician, PA, ARNP, is not teaching you what you need to do in your life, whether it's your food, your sleep, your exercise, if they aren't even asking those questions, they're not working for you.
No. And
They're not, and I will even step back and say it's their job to know their job.
yes.
However, if I was the client, I would no longer just take their word. There's so much information out there, and yes, it can be hard to sift through, but we kind of have to listen to common sense, right? Like, what did our body have in it that made us sleep well, made us build bones well? What did our generation prior, my grandmother, she never had a computer. She died when I was probably maybe 13 or 14. She never had a computer in her home. She had a dial-up phone, she didn't have all the technology, but she went and visited the old people. She went and, did all these different things. Like, she was busy, she was living. She wasn't existing. She was living to her fullest to the last day. Well, maybe we need to look back and step back. Well, why is that? She had 15 children.
Wow. That's
She
amazing.
was a busy woman.
Yes, she was.
But at the same time, her lifestyle was, it was from her garden, it was from the animals they raised. She made her own food. She didn't go through drive-through windows. you know? I mean, we could go on and on about those things, but do you think maybe that's part of the picture? And how easy is that? It's inexpensive to learn how to, eat whole foods. It's easy to learn how, I mean, you we have YouTube, right? We have
Learn
YouTube,
anything,
right?
right?
It's not our fingers, it's not our phone. And those practical things really make a big difference. You mentioned vitamin D. Well, man, if you think about northern latitudes where we live, when I get labs back, it's not uncommon for me to see 20 or 30.
Wow.
I mean, just why is that? This information's been out for a long time. Why isn't your practitioner saying to you, "Hey, I need you to make sure." In fact, I've had them say, "Oh, I think that's too much," because they have a level of 70 or 80. And I'm like, "Do you even know where these lab numbers come from? Do you even know what you're reading?" You know, just think of how many things that just with that nutrient, you know, alone, we could prevent. I mean, one of the terms that we use around our pharmacy is not flu season, it's low vitamin D season. And that's from our friend, Dr. Cole, because that was one of the things that he taught us. And it's so true. But think of the impact that it has on us for our hormones. It has a hormone structure.
Right.
It's
It's the
involved in
building
that
block.
cascade.
Yeah, it's the
Right.
building block of our sex hormones. So,
Yes.
when that's low, and then I look at my patients that come through and I'm looking at their labs. I just had a patient the other day. Her doctor didn't even mention her vitamin D level being low to her, and it was 37. Okay, so
Right.
just because it's in the normal range of 30 to 100, I think it is on an actual lab, it was 37. Well, that's low, and we need to be supplementing with that. Yes, sometimes it's hard to, depending on where you live, are you getting enough sunlight? And even if you are getting stuff from food and you're getting, your nutrition from food, what's your gut doing? Are you absorbing it? What medications are you taking that could be affecting the absorption? Again, it's not like what you said earlier, it's not just one thing that's affecting a person's levels. It's really taking a step back and doing an overhaul of lifestyle and taking it back to basics and really just opening your eyes and looking at, what foods are we putting in the body? Are we avoiding the processed foods? We're all guilty of doing things on the run. Life, I always, say to my clients, I get it. Our bodies don't know the difference in 2025 between being chased by a bear, by being chased by a bear and just basically trying to exist in 2025 with everything being a touch, touch, touch. Like you just said, YouTube, we can learn anything and watch a video on anything at the tip of our finger, just bam, order a meal, bam, order something from Amazon. It's there in 24 hours. Everything, DoorDash, just anything. Everything is quick, quick, quick. It's like that quick dopamine hit. And
Mhm.
all of our hormones and neurotransmitters all signal each other and communicate. And I think that's such a big thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, in Western medicine, we go to doctors and we'll go to a specialist for a cardiologist and a pulmonologist and a dermatologist, and we look at one section of the body, but those specialists just kind of are almost, well, it's not my lane to look at the other systems in the body. And it's like, but everything that we do affects every system in the body. You can't just single one out and treat it from there.
Right. And I think, we've talked about this before, but I really think we've gotten into a place and a space where, you know, practitioners work for the insurance company
Yeah.
and the clinic they're working for.
Yep.
They should be working for the patient, but
Absolutely.
that's totally changed, right? And, and in my opinion, no matter how much schooling you've had, you have to self-teach yourself too. You have to go out there. How many times have we relearned something like, oh, well, we used to do it this way, but now we know this, right? But like you said, we're still on the hamster wheel. How many people would say if your cholesterol is above 200, you have to be on a statin? Well, what about the studies that are coming out of Europe? And what about the studies that we're doing here in the United States that are looking at, it's not just the total number, right? Are you even checking someone's insulin level? Are you even checking, did they, how many times I get labs and somebody didn't fast.
And I think
Useless.
even too, we talk about like the cardiovascular system. Like I love to use the word cardiometabolic because people think
Mhm.
metabolism and they think, oh, weight loss, right? They automatically
Yeah.
think like insulin, weight loss. But our metabolism isn't just about what we eat and how our food is broken down, where I think a lot of people have that way that we've been taught to look at something, where we have a cardiometabolic system of how things are broken down in our circulatory system. Every system has that. And now where we're starting to shift the picture, even where not just, we've been talking about it in the functional medicine space for years, but now you hear actual cardiologists starting to talk about the enzymes that are inflammatory enzymes in the
Right.
cardiovascular system, and starting to look at those and how inflammation, which is the root of all disease, inflammation
Right.
wherever in the body, is now they're starting to take a look at these, but still taking into consideration that the ultimate end all be all is our cholesterol enzymes. And that's how we determine putting people on a medication and looking at how healthy their heart is. When I mean, I think I take those numbers with a very, very, very
Yeah.
small grain of salt. You know what I mean? Like I look at them and I say, okay, and if they're very much out of skew, okay. But I don't look at them like I want to dive in deeper, and I want to see what's actually going on in the body and why the heart might be functioning, why somebody might be having a cardiovascular issue. And a lot of times, like you said, it comes down, why are we not looking at things like insulin and how we're breaking down, and obesity,
Right.
all of those things.
Right. Well, as an organism, it all has to play together, right? There has to be the balance. There is appropriate time for insulin to go up. There's an appropriate time for it to go down. There's times like, you have an injury, you should be using the body's ability to respond and deal naturally. I mean, at our house, we don't use anti-inflammatories. Occasionally I'll say Shawn break down, but at the same time, it's like there's a natural process, right? So we need to support that. And really the intervention, I think, um, in my opinion, for women's health starts super young. I think it starts, you know, from the time you're born, from your mother's health, and then, as we journey and the nutrients on how we build our body have to be good.
Yep.
And, the only thing I remember my pediatrician saying to me is that, oh my God, you can't give your child XYZ, right? Until they're this age or this age. Well, we never really talked about as they age what healthy foods, right? It was just avoid this, avoid this, avoid this, introduce this so you can now or whatever, right? We do a horrible job of teaching parents nutritional needs. And you probably see this, and this is one thing I talk to women about, especially our young women, because even my staff gets to hear it from me. They show up with their Starbucks and their whatever food to start their day. They grab lunch, right? What nutrient value did their body get to build tissue in the correct way? How are we feeding our bodies? To expect our hormones to be spot on when we are giving it junk isn't going to happen. So it starts very young. I do a few mom and me's, and I love doing that because I feel like if moms know how to help their daughters and daughters know how to help themselves live appropriately, that's going to make a big difference in their ability to be healthy throughout their life because you're building your tissue, and we should be the strongest at 25, 30, right? Like our bones should be and our muscles should be, right? And
Yes.
we're not.
No.
And then, we're headed into that space, like you and I, where I have so many friends that, we've been in menopause for how long? And I don't know about you, but I don't want to go in the grocery store with a motorized vehicle.
No. No. Heck
I
no.
want to walk, right? I I just, and how we continue to maintain and be healthy, you can't ignore lifestyle. You can't ignore, and functional medicine has been there, but I think mainstream does have to to lean into it. Now, I don't believe in supplementing yourself out of everything. I know there's people that, well, if you ate right, exercise, blah, 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 you wouldn't have. Well, we're not in a perfect world.
No.
We just aren't. So, we might have to step back and say, okay, for now, we need to help balance you with this or balance with that. One of the hormones that I speak to women about a lot of times is testosterone. Yes, we do need testosterone. Men do too. We just need less. Our cells are sensitive. We don't need as much. But if you think about if you have maintain or can maintain your muscles and your bones, your movement is going to last much longer. I mean, you and I have seen the ladies that have had osteoporosis or, have had a fall. It's a big deal.
It is.
The other issue that just frustrates me is our women, 70, 80, or 90-year-old women should not be dealing with urinary tract infections.
No.
It's avoidable. There's so many things that we could teach them and help them to prevent, have quality of life. And somebody always has a money grab, and I'll say it because that's what hysterectomies have turned out for some women. It's just a money grab. I'm going to say meshes are the same way. You can only have so many meshes implanted, and after a while, the tissue is not as viable. But I will say I have women, I think she's 84 now. I have one lady that's 84 and teaches 3 classes a day of aerobics and health, 2 ladies in my community, and she is gorgeous. She's beautiful.
Love it.
She's vibrant. She's going to be running up to the day she dies because she does the things that makes her body healthy, right? She did have a hysterectomy, but she did go on bioidentical hormones afterwards. But the inputs that we do on a day-to-day basis adds up over time. It just does.
Absolutely. And, I see a lot of times when I look at my patients and we'll look at hormone labs and really dive in a lot of times too. And I know you mentioned this earlier when we talked about like external factors, chemicals and things, so many different plastics and scented fragrances, things that we put in and on our body or are breathing in act as xenoestrogens in the body that block these receptors and almost kind of act the same way, taking synthetic hormones, blocking receptors, making our bodies kind of shutting things down. And a lot of times we'll look at, helping, how does our estrogen get metabolized? Those metabolites go through the liver. And a lot of times if people aren't taking care of that, and a lot of times it's silly because it's like, oh, we have a liver, we have kidneys that process toxins, but we live in an ever toxic world where our soil is not the same soil as our ancestors. Even when we do buy organic fruits and vegetables at the grocery store, they're wrapped in plastics. It's like you can't get away from it, but we can be proactive to say, hey, every now and again we can take some do a little bit of cleaning on our liver and our gut to kind of help things pass through, because what you don't know. And if our liver's not functioning in tip top shape, because I always say our liver's the most like overworked and underpaid organ in the body. And a
Mhm.
lot of times, it's not just the metabolism of our hormones, of our estrogen. It's also, it can be the metabolism of all of our hormones, from stress to sunlight to the foods we're eating,
Yep.
the fragrances, chemicals we're putting in and on our skin, what we're absorbing, all of that all compounds to can compound to hormone issues and imbalances. So, it's even the things, that we might have control over, like, okay, we can pick healthier choices with nutrition and know what to eat, but there's a lot of times things that we are exposed to in the environment that we can't always control. So just being proactive to help our bodies process things better, and just do the different self-care or lifestyle modifications to live healthy. We can't get rid of all of them. I always tell people the 80/20 rule when it comes to lifestyle management. We can't do everything perfectly, but if we have the opportunity to make the healthier choices, go for it.
Right. And it can feel overwhelming. I mean, because we've got so many people out there. Oh, you have to have this and this and this and this. But start with something.
Yes.
Start today with 1 or 2 things.
Yes.
Make it make it easy. If there's something you should cut out, I mean, I tell my girls, I make my coffee at home.
Yep, me too.
Or I know what's in it, right? I don't put weird creamer.
Mm-mm.
I made sure Shawn doesn't either. We have real cream, those kind of things. But those little things add up.
They
And
do.
it's those little things that we can do. I mean, we've changed our toothpaste. We noticed too, I actually blamed Shawn. I thought he was sending me coffee in a cup that had soap still in it. And I'm like, why is this coffee tasting so bad? It was just terrible. And then I realized when I got home and started drinking our water from our fridge that it was our water. And
Yep.
we have been in a well water for a long time. And I'm like, when did this change? Like,
Mhm.
when did this? So we actually started filtering our water, not just with the refrigerator filter, but with a real filter,
Yep.
because there was so many chemicals that were being added to, and you could smell it, you could taste it. It was different. Um, and that's just one thing that we did differently, but I think it makes dents in our day. Like over time, it adds up. So,
It
pick
does.
a few things and then build on it. You don't have to do everything today. I'm not the person that says, throw your whole pantry away and then start fresh. Just choose some things. I think too, for women, we were talking about nutrients, you know, we have to pay attention to that or we will end up very uncomfortable. And, we talked a little bit about osteoporosis, but to me, this is just the saddest thing in the world. You can have somebody that's up moving, fall out of their bed, or just fall in their house. And within a couple of years, their life is gone,
Yep.
right? Like they die miserably and it's preventable. We need to teach women how to build their bones from the time they're young. And that is failed. Like, I think that's the sad diet that we learned in school, whether it was, our classes at our high school or, elementary, whatever. That pyramid has to go. It's wrong,
It's
right?
upside down.
It's totally wrong, right? So, pick things that make sense for yourself and don't make it that hard. It's like, when I'm talking to women about movement and exercise, start somewhere.
Yep.
It's never too late to start somewhere.
Nope.
But don't expect your doctor to tell you this because most of them have not informed themselves. Most of them are still going to say, "Oh, you don't, okay, here's this. Oh, you don't, here's this." And, you know, in pharmacy school, we were always taught everything can be a poison and too much, or it can be harmful and too little. For example, I always tell people water, for example, your body has to have water. We need water. I think we were 70% made of water, right? If you don't have water, you're not going to be healthy. But if you gave yourself too much, it's damaging too. Well, we've kind of lost sight in polypharmacy and big pharma where we just think, oh, well, oh, well, if you're not feeling good and you're struggling and you've been put on all these meds, I don't tell people to throw their meds, find somebody to help you with that. But you can exist in this world without big pharma on a day to day. Yes, if there's an emergency, and there may be a few places where we do need to supplement with some medications, but for the majority of us, we can get it back with our lifestyle. Finding what's causing the problem, I think hypertension has a lot to do with our lifestyle, a lot to do with what we are eating and not sleeping. I mean, think about all the triggers too. Like, as a mom, if my kid isn't tired, he's not going to sleep well. So I'm going to get him outside and I'm going to wear him out, right? But if they're outside playing in the sunshine or out in the weather running around, how much different their sleep is as if they were in the house. Well, it's not just the exercise, it's all the things that nature brings us. It's the sun, it's the wind, it's the smell, it's, touching the earth. It's all of it. And we have to return to that to think that we're going to be, we were meant to be in the earth we live in. We have to get back to it. There's so many people that are on pavement every day. We need grass, we need trees, we need sunlight. because all those things trigger things in our body more so than we even acknowledge.
It is. It's absolutely therapy and it's back to basics. And, and it comes down to too, just even the just lifestyle of 2025 of everything being such this fast-paced environment that people sometimes don't even really see sunlight when they're in their job, especially coming up this time of year where, we set the clocks back. I think this weekend. And, it's now we lose that light, and it's those people that are driving to work in the dark and driving home in the dark. And,
Mhm.
it's just so not good. Some you see the kids out waiting for the school bus, and it's dark in the morning, and it's like a lot of times just those basic things are lacking, and a lot of times it has to do with just keeping up in the hustle and the bustle, and almost like, well, how do you get back there? How do some people that don't have the capability to do that even, take that first step, whether it's, if they can have a lunch break and they can go outside and take a
Yep.
walk or just sit out in the sunlight just to do these, like you said, the little things, just start with one thing at a time.
Mhm. Yeah, I encourage my staff on your 10-minute break, do a walk, get out, step out away from the phones, away from all the, get outside. Whether even if they're sitting in their car, it's better
Yeah.
than sitting inside of an office. Because that mind break that we give ourselves, I used to try to work through the whole entire day, right?
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more you're like, I need to step aside. I need to step out. I need to, but we need to give ourselves permission to do those things, and we need to find those things. It's just like movement. Um, in pharmacy, you're either standing or you might be sitting, depending. But we were meant to move, and we weren't meant to be on a computer screen all the time. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but one of the first things that I had problems with was my eyes were becoming fatigued. Part of that was the technology when we first started. The screens are not as nice as they are now. And they didn't have the little, where you could block out blue light, all that. But um, giving yourself a break from something actually increases production. And I think all of our hormones, our stress hormones, our gut, our brain, it all has to come together. If I think about cultures that live long enough, if you're looking at Japan, they still have McDonald's. They just don't supersize, right? They're more interactive with their meals. Well, my husband and I have talked about this a lot. Think about how different we eat when we're with other people.
Mhm.
The food isn't the number one priority. I mean, we want it to be good, right? But it's the people around us, right? So the interaction with other humans makes such a difference on how we ingest and digest and how we feel, and the experience is so different. Western cultures kind of lost that. You step into other countries, and you know that's not an issue. They haven't lost that. So we have to be intentional, and just make small steps again. But lowering your stress is going to heal your hormone imbalances because your cortisol is not off the chart.
Yes. And again, all of the hormones, they communicate with each other, just like every part of the body. We can't just, single out estrogen. We can't just single out cortisol. They all communicate with each other, and our cortisol just keeps pumping, pumping, pumping,
Right.
as we're under these stressful situations, whether it's an acute stress that's actually something stressful, or just even the constant, dopamine hits from just a scrolling on social media, or just constantly having a screen in front of us, or, whatever it is. It's like our bodies, that affects our hormones, all of the hormones across the board, from insulin and cortisol and our sex hormones
Yep.
and, everything. So it's our neurotransmitters, everything back down to, circling back to vitamin D, they all affect each other. And And if we don't take the time, like you just said, even with meal hygiene, really sitting and enjoying a meal and it not just being about shoveling food in, up, get it in, get it in. I can't tell you how for how many years being in retail
Yes.
pharmacy, if you didn't shovel it in fast, you didn't get it because you'd go to take a bite and somebody would need you. And I think of how so many years I was so unhealthy with that because it was just the way it was. And you live and you learn. And it's like, nothing is worth that when your
Mm-mm.
health starts to shift because of it.
Yeah. So one of the very first things that Shawn and I did as a pharmacist when we opened our stores, we closed for lunch.
I love that.
And we've done that from day one. And it's not always about how much food you get, it's that you need that mental break.
Agreed.
You need to step aside. You need to go to the bathroom. You need to, those things are important. And if we are living in a lifestyle where, you can't barely go to the bathroom, you can't barely eat, you can't until you leave, you are stressed the whole day, the whole entire day.
Yes,
And that's not a good thing.
no, my first week as a pharmacist, I actually got a urinary tract infection after probably my second or third 14-hour shift in you're nervous, you don't want to walk away from the station, and maybe I didn't even pee the whole shift. I certainly wasn't drinking enough fluids back then. This was
Right.
my, 25-year-old self back in the day. But yes, I remember it distinctly. My first week as a pharmacist, I developed a UTI, and I was like, this is not healthy. We need to make some shifts starting like right now, making sure that you're hydrated. Sometimes, you're busy and you look at your water bottle and it's down this much after, 8 hours. And it's like, reminding yourself that those little things matter. You just said 70% of our bodies are made up of water, something like that. So making sure that we stay hydrated and not just with flooding ourselves with water, the right water, looking
Mhm.
for toxins and filtration and making sure it has the right minerals in it, the spark plugs of how all of our hormones function, right?
Totally. Yeah. You can't just, I mean, and that's kind of the point, too much of and not enough of another thing in the balance, I mean, I think that's one thing we can learn from our Asian culture is that there's a balance and we need to get that balance going again. And I think that's one of the passions that Shawn and I have in our practice is that we believe in balancing things because they all work together. You can't have one thing without the other. It just doesn't work that way. You have to have, one of the things that I always said to my teenage boys as they were growing, and Shawn harped on it too, is that your sleep becomes more important than your workout, because they'd be in the gym working out, wanting to be strong and build their muscles, good for them. But your sleep, if you're gonna cut your sleep and stay up all night and do all these other things, that workout was not going to do you any service, So, um, you know, everything comes in a balance, recovery's super important. So those breaks, eating, drinking, sleeping, it all works together.
Absolutely. I tell my son that every day too. I'm like, sleeping is our detox for our brain, our lymphatic system, right? If we're not getting into those right different cycles and deep sleep, and we're not actually draining all of the junk to replenish us for the next day, again, not only does it not make us be able to function and think properly, but it affects the way that everything works, cycling back around to our hormones.
Totally. I totally agree. Yep.
Well, I love all of this, and I encourage all of our listeners to, yes, pick one or two things, even if they seem small or silly. If it's getting outside for 10 minutes in the sunlight and grounding and getting in touch with the earth, actually touching the earth with your feet, getting sunlight, upgrading your water, looking at the source of it, what is in it, any kind of movement, really, being aware of lifting heavy and starting that at an early age. I think, it's sometimes people have the wrong idea of getting bulky and it's not about that. It's about prepping your body at a young age and throughout the years so that when you're in your later years that you have strong bones and strong muscles to for longevity and to feel good and to be vibrant and to actually be able to enjoy your life versus, like you said, driving a scooter into the grocery store. You want to be on a hike climbing a mountain and having
Exactly.
fun, in your retirement years, not being sick in the doctor's office and taking a myriad of prescriptions.
Exactly. Yep. And it's, for most of us, it's a choice. Sometimes life happens, but to me, we've really failed, I think, in the healthcare industry of giving people a pharmaceutical with a false hope. If we just give a drug without lifestyle, I think we failed our clients. We need to teach them the things that keep them healthy and make them healthy. If they don't know, they don't know. And if we don't tell them, we haven't given them the tools. The Hippocratic Oath is lost. Where is it? We shouldn't lose that.
It is. And I know in the fast-paced environment of the pharmacy, as much as I tried to incorporate integratively, taking that approach of lifestyle and hey, if this is depleting, hey, take this supplement with this medication. But a lot of times those, when you're in the hustle bustle, you can't talk to every single person and give them a, 5, 10 minute consultation. It's just not realistic, in between all the other things we're doing in the pharmacy. And, you know, that's why I had to walk away from my career as a pharmacist. I felt like I was becoming more of the problem when I knew I had the solutions, right in my back pocket. So for me, it is very personal, and I take each and every one of my patients and clients to, their health and wellness to heart, because I think it's that informed decision making is lost, and it needs to come back. So,
Mhm.
if that's our one and only takeaway from our listeners today, is that, you know encouraging people to not just take somebody's word for something because they have, a bunch of letters after their name, or, are double board certified, and, can just, whip out scripts. Kind of look at the whys and look at you as a person, and not a cookie cutter approach, and what do I need personally, or this medication in general. What are the side effects? Are there things, if I do need this medication, or it is bridging a gap, I'm not going to be on it forever, but I do need to take it, what precautions should I take, and what else should I be doing to kind of counterbalance? Or, do I even need this at all? Can I find what's going on in my body and heal it from that root cause, and start there.
I totally agree with that. I think that's where medicine started, right? Let's get back to the basics. And, I've had people say to me, well, how do you feel that you're qualified? Well, um, centuries of our ancestors that were pharmacists helped people heal. So did doctors. And really, a physician should be a teacher, right? I think that's
100%.
our role, in pharmacy as well, is to teach people. And so stepping out of, I mean, Big Pharma's been here how long, right?
I was just going to say, yeah, very long time, 100 years.
Yeah, right. So, I take a lot of pride in our history of our profession, and physicians could go back to the same thing too. And I know there are. I'm just saying that, as consumers and as patients and as people out there, I agree with what you're saying. Educate yourself and ask those questions. I think that's super important.
Yeah. Well, it has been a pleasure chatting as always. I can't wait to do it again. You are always a wealth of knowledge, and you are my go-to hormone lady. And I love all that you do in your career and even personal life as an activist for women, women's health, hormones, and really do make a difference and an impact in every person that you speak to, because the truth is so powerful, and education and knowledge is so powerful. So thank you for all that you do. I'm blessed to know you as a friend and colleague.
Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure, and I always enjoy talking with you and look forward to the next time.
Have a wonderful day.
I will. You too, Courtney.
Thank you.